You ever hear a story that just grabs you by the heart and doesn't let go? Well, let me tell you about Frank. He's 74, grew up fixing engines, loved one woman his whole life, and somehow found himself living in the backseat of a '98 Camry, eating cold beans and arguing with raccoons. Yeah, it gets real. But this isn't a sad story. This is a comeback story. One of those quiet, powerful journeys where life knocks you flat, and somehow, against all odds, you get back up, coffee in hand, bad knees and all, and keep going. And if you've ever felt alone, lost, or like the world forgot you were still here, this one's for you. Stick around, because by the end of this story, I promise, Frank might just remind you how strong the human spirit really is. And hey, while you're here, go ahead and hit that like button so more folks can hear stories that matter. And if you believe in second chances and stubborn old men with cast iron pans, consider subscribing. You'll be in good company. Now let's get into it. Now, Frank's not some fictional hero. He's not polished or poetic. He's real. The kind of man who still reads the paper with his morning coffee, black, no sugar, and curses at the crossword like it owes him money. He's the last of a generation that fixed things instead of replacing them. Greased elbows, loyalty thicker than molasses, and that quiet pride that comes from living through decades that would buckle most folks today. Frank was a mechanic by trade. 40 years under the hood, hands scarred from socket wrenches slipping, knees creaky from crawling under cars in the dead of winter, and a back that had more stories to tell than he did. He married Nancy in 1970. High school sweetheart, Sunday school singer, best banana bread maker this side of the Mississippi, according to Frank anyway. They were a team. She ran the books, he ran the shop. She packed his lunch every day, little notes tucked inside, always signed, "Love you more than Tuesday night meatloaf." And they did love Tuesday meatloaf. But nothing stays the same forever, does it? Nancy got sick. The kind of sick where the doctors stop smiling and start talking slow. Cancer. It stole her piece by piece, and Frank stayed by her side till the very last breath. He still talks about that day like it was both a minute ago and 1,000 years past. After Nancy passed, Frank kept the house. Couldn't bring himself to sell it. Said her voice still echoed in the kitchen. Said the living room still smelled like lavender and old books. But what he didn't say, not at first, was that the silence after she was gone? It was deafening. People don't talk about that enough. How quiet becomes the loudest sound in the room. He'd turn on the TV just to hear voices, leave lights on in rooms he wasn't in, sit at the kitchen table with 2 coffee cups, still pouring hers just in case. Frank didn't cry much, but every so often he'd grip the edge of the sink like it was the only thing holding him upright. Living alone wasn't about being by himself. It was about being with the memories. And some nights, those memories were heavier than any engine he ever lifted. You know that feeling when everything seems to hit all at once? Like life just takes a big old baseball bat and swings at your knees while you're already limping. That was Frank's life 2 winters ago. See, Frank was managing. Not thriving, but managing. He had his pension, a little social security, and he knew how to stretch $1 farther than a rubber band on a Sunday roast. He didn't buy fancy things. He drove his old '98 Toyota Camry like it was a Cadillac. Fixed it himself too, because of course he did. But then, the furnace broke. Now, in Ohio, that's not a small problem. That's survival. The house dropped to bone-chilling cold, the kind where your breath fogs up inside your own kitchen. He bundled up in layers, wore gloves to bed, even tried warming the place with the oven, but after one night nearly falling asleep next to an open flame, he knew it was time. The repair bill? Over $4,000. He paid it, Because when it's between freezing to death and emptying your savings, you make the only choice that makes sense at the time. But it cleaned him out. Right after that came the car repairs, transmission issues. Then his lower molar cracked, infected, had to pull it. No insurance, so that hit him too. And those property taxes? They never stop knocking, even when your bank balance is whispering for help. It was like someone flipped a switch. Every little thing he had under control for years suddenly started spiraling. Frank started missing payments. Just one here, one there. Promised to catch up. Wrote the dates on the back of old envelopes. But the world doesn't run on good intentions, especially not landlords. He was late on rent 3 times in 5 months. By the 6th, they slapped on fees. By the 7th, the tone of the letters changed. They stopped calling him Mr. Harris and started calling him Tenant. You know it's bad when even the mail starts losing its manners. One cold, grey morning, he got the final notice. He had 10 days. Frank packed up what he could, tools, clothes, a few photo albums, Nancy's old Bible, and left the apartment for good. He didn't cry. He didn't punch the wall. He just sighed, real long and low, and said, "Well, guess the Camry's home now." You think you know what rock bottom is until you find yourself brushing your teeth in a gas station bathroom at 5:45 in the morning. Frank parked the Camry behind a 24-hour grocery store. Figured the security cameras gave him some safety, and the lot stayed busy enough that he wouldn't be noticed right away. He had his blanket, a pillow that had long lost its fluff, and a small stash of snacks he kept in the glove box. Granola bars, beef jerky, and, for some reason, a can of pineapple chunks. "Don't ask," he'd laugh. "It was on sale." The nights were the worst. The seat didn't recline all the way, and his knees didn't bend like they used to. He'd prop his feet on the dashboard, crack the window a smidge for air, and hope nobody came knocking. Some nights, teenagers threw things. One time, a raccoon climbed on the hood. Nearly had a heart attack thinking it was a repo man with fur. But he kept his routine. Every morning, he went to the gym down the street. Not to work out, no, Frank said. "I ain't pumping iron, I'm pumping soap." He'd shower, shave, even iron his shirt in the locker room. Said looking clean made him feel human. And he needed that, because the world starts treating you differently when you live in your car. People don't see you anymore, or worse, they see through you. What kept him going? Habit, pride, and a stubborn little voice in his gut that whispered, "You've come too far to quit now, old man." Funny enough, Frank met a few other seniors in similar boats. Quiet types. One lived in a van, another slept behind the bowling alley. They started sharing tips, where to get free coffee, which places didn't kick you out for charging your phone. It was like a club no one wanted to join, but everyone leaned on each other just the same. Frank kept saying, "This ain't the end of me, it's just the pit stop." He had no plan, no destination, just grit. And that old Camry. But little did he know, one freezing night and one very loud cough would be the turning point, the moment everything changed. Frank always said he wasn't afraid of dying. He just didn't want to freeze to death with pineapple chunks in the glove box. But that Ohio winter didn't care about dignity or humor. It was January, the kind of cold that bites through 3 layers of flannel and rattles your bones just for fun. Frank had managed to make it through a few rough weeks, rotating his parking spots, rotating his socks, doing his best to stay under the radar. He'd pick up cheap coffee from the gas station, wrap his coat tighter, and mutter, "Just one more night," like it was a prayer. But then the cough started. At first, it was just a little nagging hack. Nothing too dramatic. He figured it was dust, or maybe the cold air messing with his lungs. He popped cough drops like candy and kept moving. But within days, it turned into something nastier. Deep, chesty coughs that made him grip the steering wheel just to stay upright. Fever followed. Then the chills. Then the confusion. He couldn't remember where he parked one night, and for a man like Frank, who'd remembered part numbers from 1983, that was terrifying. That night, he stumbled into the emergency room, shivering, pale, out of breath. He didn't have insurance, didn't have a plan, didn't even have clean underwear. But he had one thing going for him: Sheila. Sheila was a nurse with a voice like gravel and a heart like a cast-iron skillet, warm, seasoned, and ready to knock some sense into you if you got out of line. She didn't sugarcoat it. "You've got pneumonia, Frank. And I don't mean the cute kind. I mean the kind that eats old men like you for lunch." Frank grinned and said, "Well, at least I won't have to sleep in the Camry tonight." She didn't laugh. Instead, she sat by his bed during her break and asked him, straight up, "Why are you out here alone? Where's your family?" He just stared at the wall. Because that was the thing. There was no one. No kids. Nancy was gone. Most of his friends had either passed or were buried in their own troubles. What was he supposed to say? "I've got a car and a bad cough, want to swap life stories?" But Sheila wasn't the kind of person who backed off. She made a few calls, pulled some strings. And just like that, Frank's story took a turn. It wasn't a miracle. No lottery ticket or long-lost inheritance. Just one good human doing what good humans are supposed to do. By the way, if this story's hitting home, or if you know someone like Frank, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want more real stories like this, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. This channel's all about hope, grit, and second chances, especially for seniors who've seen some storms. Now, back to Frank. When Frank was discharged from the hospital 3 days later, he wasn't sent back to his car. He was handed a phone number, a name, a ride. He ended up at a local senior support center. Not fancy, not shiny, but warm and real and full of people who didn't blink when he said he'd been sleeping in a sedan with a cough and a can of fruit. The place offered transitional housing for seniors down on their luck. Frank called it the halfway house for the half-forgotten. He was put in a shared living unit with 3 other men, each with their own stories, scars, and, unfortunately, snoring patterns. At first, he hated it. The thermostat was always too warm. The coffee was weak, and the guy in the next room kept playing 80s soft rock through the wall like it was his personal concert hall. If I hear air supply one more time, I swear I'm moving back into my trunk. But something shifted. They had a little kitchen, and Frank, being the kind of man who couldn't pass a dirty skillet without scrubbing it, started cooking again. Nothing fancy, just eggs, toast, and that old Frank touch, using that same cast-iron skillet he'd been lugging around since his house days. The other guys started calling him Chef Frankie. He didn't correct them. They had routines. Mornings meant burnt toast and arguments over the news. Afternoons were for walks, card games, or just sitting on the porch and talking about absolutely nothing. And once a week, volunteers came in. Haircuts, hot meals, even a local guy who did free car repairs. One of the volunteers noticed Frank's hands. "You ever worked on engines?" the guy asked. "Son," Frank replied, "I could rebuild a carburetor in my sleep, which, ironically, is where I used to do most of my dreaming until I landed here." The man chuckled and offered him a few hours a week helping out at a youth auto workshop. Just like that, Frank was back under the hood, teaching teenagers how to fix brakes and troubleshoot bad spark plugs. But more than that, he was being seen again. He wasn't invisible anymore. And that first paycheck? It was small, but he used it to buy coffee, real coffee, for the whole house. Said it was his way of saying thanks. Now here's where Frank really starts to speak from his gut. After everything, the cold nights, the hospital bed, the stink of shame that comes from having to explain to a stranger why you live in your car, Frank wants you to know something. He says people think rock bottom is loud and dramatic, like an explosion or a meltdown. But most of the time, it's quiet. It sneaks up on you. One missed bill, one bad winter, one silent dinner in an empty kitchen. Then suddenly you're sleeping in your car behind a grocery store, trying to pretend it's temporary while your hope quietly unpacks its bags. Frank will tell you he's not special. He's not a hero. He just didn't give up. He says it like this. Thing is, we think needing help means we failed. But listen, nobody gets through life without falling. It's just that some of us fall later than others. And if you're lucky, someone reaches out a hand instead of walking by. He also says, with a laugh, that the one thing he learned about being homeless is that you really don't need half the junk you think you do. I had boxes of stuff I thought mattered. Trophies, knickknacks, 10,000 bolts, and screws in the garage. But you know what I missed the most? A warm chair, a hot meal, and someone to laugh with. Frank doesn't preach. He just shares. He says if you're alone right now, or slipping toward a dark place, you need to know that asking for help isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's survival. And if you're someone not in that place, and you see someone who is, don't assume. Don't judge. Sometimes the guy with the shopping cart used to run a business. Sometimes the man sleeping in his Camry used to fix your brakes. He says, you never know whose story you're walking past. And he's right. These days, Frank's life doesn't look like much on paper. He doesn't have a big house, doesn't drive a shiny car. He's not jet-setting or snapping photos of fancy brunches. But you sit with him for 5 minutes, and you'll realize the man is rich in all the ways that matter. He lives in a shared home with 3 other fellas, each with their quirks. There's George, who watches weather reports like it's a religion. Earl, who believes aliens built the Hoover Dam. And then there's Pete, the quiet one, who nods a lot and somehow wins every game of dominoes without saying a word. Frank calls them the Old Goats Club. They cook together, clean together, and bicker like brothers on a road trip that never ends. He wakes up early, not because he has to, but because he wants to. That still surprises him, honestly. There was a time not long ago when getting out of bed felt like dragging a sack of bricks uphill. Now he wakes to the smell of coffee and the sound of George yelling at the TV. That ain't rain, that's mist. Frank makes breakfast on Thursdays. Real breakfast, mind you. None of that soggy cereal nonsense. Eggs fried in his trusty old cast-iron pan, toast brown to the edge of burnt, and sometimes, if he's feeling generous, he throws in sausage. He's got a special ritual, too. Before every meal, he mumbles under his breath, "This one's for you, Nan." Just a little whisper. Just enough. And on Saturdays, Frank heads to the youth garage down by the old train yard. It's a community project now, part vocational, part mentorship, part therapy for men who don't know how to talk about pain unless there's grease under their nails. Frank fits right in. He teaches kids how to change oil, how to listen to the sound of an engine like it's speaking a language, and more than once he's pulled a teenager aside and said, "You don't need to fix every problem all at once. Just tighten what's loose, and the rest will hold together." They call him Mr. Frank now. And even though he grumbles about it, you can see the pride in his eyes every time one of those kids gets their hands right for the first time. He told me something not long ago. He said, "I used to think my life ended the day I left my house. But now I see. Maybe that was just the beginning of the part I was meant to live." That hit me. Because it's true. Some stories start with heartbreak, but end in healing. Some heroes don't wear capes. They wear oil-stained jackets and hand out tough love with a side of bacon. Frank's not just surviving anymore. He's living. And he swears the Camry still runs better than half the cars on the road, though he admits it smells permanently like despair and cough drops. Hey, if you've made it this far, first of all, thank you. You didn't just listen to a story. You witnessed something. You walked a mile in the boots of a man who's seen it all. Love, loss, frozen toes, lukewarm soup, and life after rock bottom. Frank's story isn't some dramatic Hollywood arc with violins and perfect endings. It's real, it's messy, it's got tears, cracked jokes, bad knees, and cold mornings followed by warm second chances. And maybe you saw yourself in him, or maybe you thought of someone, a neighbor, a friend, a parent, someone you haven't called in a while. So here's what I'm asking you to do, from the heart. If this story moved you, hit that like button. It helps more people find stories like Frank's. And if you believe that stories like his need to be told, stories of seniors who fall and rise again, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We've got more of these coming, not for clicks, not for fame, but because sometimes the loudest voice in the world is a quiet one that says, "I'm still here." Share this with someone who needs it. Maybe they're lonely. Maybe they're struggling. Maybe they just need to know that it's never too late to rise. And if you want more real stories like this, let me know in the comments. Frank would tell you himself, and probably with a wink, it ain't over till the Camry dies. And between you and me, that old car's still got some miles left in it.